When I'm thinking about concerns like you just raised and issues that are multidimensional, I think diversity is my first response when it comes to issues of equity. And I know that working with young people in classrooms, we need a wide range of perspectives in order for students to be able to position not only themselves, but where perhaps social issues are emerging. And so when we have a wide range of perspectives, that encourages students to think not just about points of view, but also the sources of information. When we're having that kind of diversity and also cultural knowledge and understanding in the backgrounds of how that may shape particular views, I think can be really important. So when you're asking questions, John, about issues of critical thinking and empathy and equity, my mind immediately goes to the importance of diverse perspectives and also diverse frameworks for thinking through problems. It's easy to imagine, for example, how someone with an environmental background would bring a very different perspective to an issue perhaps than someone who has a financial background. And I think when students are exposed to that, the possibility of a range of perspectives, that helps to kind of position not only the issue, but also themselves, and to understand how the issue is being discussed in particular discourses that are constructed and they're not neutral.
Lovely, Stephen. When I hear this question, I'm thinking about authentic critical thinking and empathy, and when discussing social issues and current events, I automatically think about embodying being a reflective practitioner. So not only in being reflective to the and responsive to the needs of the students and the various classroom stakeholders, such as caregivers, but also being consistently reflective of our own learnings and unlearnings, paying critical attention to the ways in which our past experiences, positionality, and intersecting identities inform our assessment of a situation, but also our pedagogical practices, and fostering those reflective practices within our students through cultivating a learning environment of thoughtful and safe inquiry for children to make mistakes and to learn. This week, it's really been sitting with me the idea of how vulnerable the learning experience is. And when we talk about authentic critical thinking and empathy when discussing social events and current issues, I automatically think of the students within the classroom. 9 times out of 10, they might have direct experience and direct lived experience with the things being talked about. And while I love having those discussions with students, I think coming back to being a reflective practitioner is also thinking very intentional about the decisions and how to have those conversations. So within my practice, I remember a lot of the time beginning right away with starting with classroom promises and really establishing those ethos of care within the classroom to really establish a space to have those discussions in a really safe way through those learning experiences.
Correnda, something that you said really resonated with me, and that was about the intersectionality of our identities. And I think helping young people understand that we are, we have multiple senses of backgrounds of who we are, and that we're not just one lens in the world ourselves. I think that's a really important skill for students and knowledge and self-awareness for students to have. And as you've aptly pointed out, for educators to have as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
These are great insights. One of the things that came to mind for me when one of the first words you said in your response, kind of, is embodied and embodying. And I think a follow-up question I have is, what ways do either of you think teachers can make room for change? Because I think, and I'll connect that back to embodiment, because I think that when we think of ourselves as physical beings, we're constantly changing. We're moving through environments, we're experiencing different sensations, and I think we often have a sense of how dynamic our sense of self can be, versus an opinion, which can feel much more fixed. And how can we encourage students to extend that embodiment, that sense of change, to their thinking, and even provide a model for it as educators and as adults, just as adults out in the world? This is something I've been thinking about a lot over the past few years, of just providing examples to students of people changing their mind and having it be positive, rather than being something that we're ashamed of or we're afraid to own up to, having that be a natural part, as natural as physical change, for instance. Um, if you have any experiences or thoughts on how that can be fostered, I'd love to hear.
Automatically, when you brought it up, it made me think of environmental education and the way within a learning space for teachers and students, change is inevitable. We're going to change from September to June. And as a teacher, we're also going to be changing from what we experience from our students and how that's going to make us show up differently for them. But when I think about an environmental ed and you speak about kind of cultivating in students an excitement for change and it not being something that's looking at as a negative, a practice that I love to do with students is finding a tree that really resonates with us and visiting it every season. So seeing what has changed, what looks different, and to really appreciate those changes. So I appreciate your question because it also offered a way for me to also come back to that practice with my students and how talking about change from a way of it's okay to change the way we think and to also make mistakes that offer those changes to happen.